What's going on YouTube? Mike here with I Heart Knives, and in this episode we're going to do a first look on the Spyderco Spydiechef. So first things first, I want to say thank you to Mike from Mike Likes Knives on Instagram and Mike Likes Knives on YouTube. Go follow him. He doesn't have a YouTube channel, but he has an Instagram, and he has a YouTube account, but he's an awesome dude. We actually don't live too far from each other, and we met up this past weekend, and he brought his Pelican case with all his knives. He said, take a look, take whatever you want, keep them, as long as you need. And he had specific requirements for this knife that he wanted. And we'll get into that in videos, but just an awesome dude. He actually has my SOCOM Elite and my Griptilian with the AWT scales. Today's video is all about the Spyderco Spydiechef. This knife I have sort of mixed feelings about. So, at first glance, it's a funky looking knife. It's different. It's a very purposeful knife. Everything on this knife is thought out thoroughly. They have a CQI version of this. Mike was telling me that the newer ones, I guess they changed the detent bearing. I guess they went to ceramic. I think this one wears down. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm guessing that's why they changed it over, just because this one wears down a little bit. But I did notice that, it's not, the ride that it takes when you go to open it and close it is just a touch gritty. And this is a daily user for Mike, so this is not a knife that he, babies by any means. It's got tons of snail trails and he uses it, but the blade shape is very deliberate. It's a knife that it has good stance. You basically have almost complete knuckle clearance at the back. Your knuckles will touch a little bit, but if you're off the table, it's perfect. And you can use about, let's say, 70% of the blade with 100% knuckle clearance, and then you get up at the tip, your hand is way off the tabletop or whatever, if you're using a cutting board. But it's basically a pocket knife style kitchen knife. It's pretty much 100% stainless steel. I mean, you can get anything to rust eventually and corrode eventually, but LC200N is just about as stainless as you're going to get for a pocket knife steel. So, it's thinly ground. It's a fairly thin blade stock. It's a very light knife. The titanium, the whole thing is titanium. The back spacers are titanium. The pocket clip is titanium. It's just a very deliberate knife, and I think that's what I like most about it. Is there's a lot of purpose behind the design. You can tell that it was a well thought out knife. So let me bring you guys closer, and I'll show you the Spydiechef close up. I've only had the knives for, just under a couple weeks, but I've got a really good idea of what I think about these knives. So first impressions of the Spydiechef, I was actually pretty impressed. The action wasn't as good as I thought it would be. I thought it would just be like a little bit more fidgety than it is. It's a fairly thin knife, like the width of the knife is fairly thin, the blade too. It's a slicey knife. I was impressed at how substantial it felt in hand. I didn't think that it would feel as good as it does in hand. I mean, it's not a cheap knife, so I knew it wouldn't be like a cheap feeling knife, but I didn't think it would feel as high quality as it does. This is kind of a knife that, like, at first glance it just looks like just a basic knife, but there's a lot of thought that goes into it, which I like a lot. I'm a fan of the LC200N. Again, I've been using the knives for about 2 weeks, and the LC200N still has a fairly sharp edge. I stropped it back once. I am gonna, I think, put a new edge because Mike requested that I sharpen it. He wants me to put an edge on it, and he wants me to see what LC200N is like to sharpen, which I'm all for. But it's still very sharp. It's a very practical steel, and I think because it's a nitrogen steel, it's the edge retention is a lot better than similar steels at the same HRC. Like this can be, a softer steel like 58, 59 HRC, but have edge retention that's, reminiscent of like a 60 or 61 HRC, like S30V. So, in that regard, it's cool. The stuff it's basically as close to rust proof as you're gonna get. This is the first edition Spydiechef, the first iteration or generation, whatever you want to call it. There's a new CQI Spydiechef out that they changed some things. They put a ceramic detent ball in. This one doesn't have that. It doesn't feel like as refined, I guess you could say. It feels like a little bit more gritty. I have a feeling that the newer one feels a lot smoother. This still opens and closes smooth, and there's not there's not a ton of drag with it, but it doesn't feel that amazing either. And here, I'll put it up to my mic, and you'll be able to hear that there's kind of like a grit or like a squeak to it. And I've tried a few different things. I've tried a little bit more KPL, didn't work. I think it's just the way it is. But I'm gonna put the knife up to my mic, and you'll be able to hear it. So when I first opened the knife, you could hear the grit, and then when I closed it, you can hear just a little bit of it too. Again, nothing to worry about. The knife does have just a touch of lock stick, nothing that I really care about. It's a well-loved, well-used knife. There's plenty of snail trails on it. Mike has used it quite a bit. He said to me, just do whatever you want with it. I haven't hard used it. It's not that kind of knife. I would never hard use this knife. First of all, it's not my knife. Second of all, it's too thin of a knife. It's not designed for that. It's designed for stainless applications. If you're in a pinch and you wanted to use it in the kitchen, you could do that. I guess if you were like out in the bush and you had like a bush crafting knife or like a fixed blade that you use to like make a fire and you had to cook some food, this would be a nice secondary knife to have as a stainless backup that you could cut food with. If you're going camping or something, that's perfect. But it's obviously not something you're going to take with you as like a primary, that's for sure. It's just not that kind of knife. But for any like EDC tasks, this is perfect. It's lightweight. It's got an awesome pocket clip. It's a deep carry pocket clip. Mike customized his with blue anodized screws, so it gives it a little bit of flair. This is actually the first Spyderco that I've felt come out of Taichung with a chamfered, and it's not like perfectly chamfered, but it's the first Spidey hole that I've seen come out of Taichung that isn't sharp. Most of the Taichung, like my Domino, has a really sharp Spidey hole. A lot of the Taichung ones, my Mantra one that came out of Taichung, Taiwan, with a really sharp Spidey hole. Most of them do, unless it's like a stone-washed blade. They're 9 times out of 10 they're gonna have sharp edges, but this knife doesn't. Even the spine, they knock the edge off. It's just a little bit chamfered, just barely. It's a funky looking blade, but it's a very purposeful blade. It has good belly so that you can get knuckle clearance. So, you know, my knuckles are touching right now, but the middle of the knife, almost all the way to the back, is in contact with what would be a cutting board. And if you go up, you know, up to the tip of the knife, you know, you're way off. So you could do a rock and chop if you had to. You know, you could like chop carrots or something, or slice carrots, or chop onions, or, you know, you can do tasks like that if you had to. Again, it wouldn't be my first choice, but in a certain scenario, it's definitely doable. I haven't had any lock issues. Again, there's just a touch of lock stick, but it is just a bare titanium frame that locks up with the blade. It's not carbidized as far as I know, and there's no lock insert. I don't know about the new one, if they carbidize it or do a lock insert, the CQI one. I imagine they probably did something with it. A lot of the older Spyderco titanium models that don't have stainless steel lock inserts, or some of them are carbidized, but you know, it seems like Spyderco, for the most part, when they do titanium, they try to do a lock insert just because they don't want to have any lock issues, because eventually the titanium will wear down, and your lockup will go to 100% at some point, you know, once it wears away, unless they do a really good job with the lock angle. But this has a shallow enough angle that it probably will hit 100% at some point. Right now, it can get pushed over to about 75%. So, something to think about if you buy like a secondary market Spydiechef. You know, the first iteration, it's something to keep in mind. The new CQI, I'm not 100% sure, but my guess is they did something to, you know, appease that. A few size comparisons. First, we'll do the Doug Ritter, the Hogue Ritter RSK Mark II. This is very close to the Griptilian, so I know the Griptilian is a very popular knife, so, you know, anybody who has a Griptilian, you'll know what the size comparison is. They're actually very similar. Like, really almost identical. The RSK Mark II is just a little bit longer overall. The handle is, you know, about 1/4 inch longer overall, and then the blade is about 3/8 of an inch or so longer, roughly. And then the rest of the comparisons will be all Spydercos. So let's start with the Manix 2. This is the Smooth G10 crew wear, and they're actually very similar in size, almost identical really. The handle length is basically the same. Maybe the Manix is just a touch longer, yeah, maybe like 1/4 inch, and then overall blade length is basically the same. So they're very, very close, very similar. All right, and then we will go for the trifecta. So pair 3, you can see that the Spydiechef is much bigger. Handle wise, you know, you're getting about an extra 1/2 inch, and then overall blade length you're getting just about another 1/2 inch extra, but actual cutting edge you're getting a significant amount more with the Spydiechef. Bigger brother, Paramilitary 2, and this handle length is just about the same. The Paramilitary 2 is a little bit longer, very close to the Manix 2, and then overall blade length you get more blade with the Paramilitary 2. And this is the K390 version of the Paramilitary 2. So you can see, you know, you get about maybe an extra 1/2 inch or so on both. But the cutting edge of the Spydiechef is actually a little bit more than the Paramilitary 2 because you don't have like a 50-50 choil with the Spydiechef. You know, the whole blade length is cutting edge. And then last but not least, Spyderco Military. And this is a pretty honkin' knife. This is the 204p version. This you do have substantially more handle, and blade length you have a pretty substantial amount as well, about an extra inch or 3/4 of an inch, somewhere around there. Cutting edge though, you are only about 3/8 of an inch more, so it's not that much different actually with overall cutting edge. There we are with the two next to each other. So those are the size comparisons, but overall first impressions of the Spydiechef, it's a stellar knife. I really have no complaints with it, except for things that they've already fixed. So, you know, the action being just a little gritty, that would be a concern for the knife. But since they've already fixed it, it's kind of pointless to talk about. The lockup thing too, you know, I mean, they've already fixed the issue, so there's no point in me blabbering about it. I think the second generation or second iteration of the Spydiechef, since it addresses any issues, it's probably even that much better, even that much more enjoyable. This is a great knife though, and it was very generous of Mike to lend it to me, and you know, to help support the channel by getting more knives. I really appreciate what he's done, and leave it in the comments. Give him, you know, right thanks to Mike, because it's really cool that he's doing this. You know, I'm not surprised, but I'm always you know, a little taken back by how cool the knife community is and has been to me. All the EDC guys, we all, you know, have the same thing in common with knives, so you know, it seems like everyone just wants to help each other out. So it's a really cool community. I am going to continue to carry this and the other two knives for probably about another week. I think 3 weeks with the 3 knives is fair. That gives me a week for each knife, but I've been carrying them, you know, 2 together on and off, so I'm actually gonna get more than a week for each knife. It'll be like a week and a half with overlaps. So yeah, great knife. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't yet. Welcome to the channel if you're new. I really appreciate all you guys, and thanks for coming along, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Later.